The world has always grappled with intolerance. Throughout history, certain groups have faced persecution and discrimination. One such chapter focuses on the systematic oppression of LGBTQ+ individuals. From discriminatory laws to societal prejudices, their journey has been fraught with challenges. This narrative delves into the extreme anti-gay programs implemented in South Africa and Canada. These programs, born out of ignorance and fueled by fear, sought to eradicate homosexuality from their respective societies. The Aversion Project in South Africa and Canada's 1960s Gaydar program stand as stark examples of these inhumane endeavors. Driven by distinct motivations, both programs aim to identify and eliminate homosexual individuals from their societies. Their methods, though different, shared a common thread of cruelty and a profound disregard for human dignity. This examination will shed light on the chilling realities faced by LGBTQ+ individuals during these periods. It will analyze the motivations behind these programs, exposing the societal prejudices and political anxieties that allowed them to flourish. Understanding the historical context of these programs is crucial. In South Africa, the Aversion Project emerged during the apartheid era, marked by racial segregation and systemic discrimination. The program targeted individuals deemed deviant from the ruling party's narrow worldview. In Canada, the Gaydar program arose during the Cold War, a time of heightened paranoia and suspicion. Homosexuality, perceived as a security risk, became a target for government surveillance and persecution. The Aversion Project, a dark chapter in South Africa's history, stands as a chilling example of systematic cruelty. This program, sanctioned by the South African Defence Force from 1971 to 1989, targeted individuals identified as homosexual within its ranks. Driven by a toxic blend of homophobia and apartheid ideology, the program sought to cure soldiers of their sexual orientation. The methods employed were nothing short of barbaric, designed to inflict both physical and psychological pain. The Aversion Project represents a horrific intersection of medical malpractice and state-sponsored persecution. The program's architects, cloaked as medical professionals, subjected victims to horrific treatments. Electric shock therapy involved administering painful jolts of electricity to patients while showing them images that triggered their homosexual desires. Here the aim was to create an association between homosexuality and pain, conditioning the victims to experience aversion to their natural feelings. Chemical castration aimed to eliminate homosexual desires through forced hormone treatments, often causing severe side effects. These procedures, carried out without informed consent, left many victims with long-lasting physical and psychological scars. The Aversion Project's impact extended far beyond physical torture. The psychological trauma endured by these individuals was profound and enduring. Many survivors struggled to come to terms with their sexuality and suffered from PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The program's legacy cast a long shadow of silence and shame, making it difficult for victims to speak out and seek justice. Many records were destroyed during the dismantling of the apartheid regime, and countless victims chose to remain silent. While the Aversion Project employed brutal physical torture, Canada's Gaydar program took a more insidious approach, preying on Cold War anxieties. This period bred a climate of paranoia and fear within Canada. Homosexuality, viewed through the distorted lens of Cold War ideology, became tragically intertwined with notions of national security. Canadian authorities believed that homosexual individuals were susceptible to blackmail by enemy agents. The Gaydar program relied heavily on pseudo-scientific methods and discriminatory practices. One prominent tool was the fruit machine, intended to detect homosexual tendencies by measuring physiological responses to homoerotic images. The fruit machine, lacking scientific validity, exemplifies the absurdity and cruelty of the program's methods. Beyond the fruit machine, the program employed invasive and discriminatory tactics. Applicants for government positions and military members were subjected to intense scrutiny, creating a climate of fear and suspicion. The consequences of being identified as homosexual under the Gaydar program were devastating. Individuals suspected of being gay were often subjected to humiliating interrogations and pressured to betray friends and colleagues. Those who refused to cooperate faced severe repercussions, including dismissal from their jobs and social ostracism. The Gaydar program's impact extended far beyond the individuals directly targeted. It fostered a culture of silence and fear within the Canadian government and military, discouraging open dialogue about sexuality. The Aversion Project and Canada's Gaydar program, though distinct in their methodologies, shared a common thread of cruelty. The Aversion Project aimed to shock homosexual desires out of existence. Electric shocks were intended to forge a Pavlovian connection between homosexual feelings and excruciating pain. Canada's Gaydar program, while shunning overt physical brutality, was no less insidious. Operating under a cloak of pseudoscience, it sought to identify and eradicate the threat of homosexuality through invasive surveillance and psychological manipulation. Despite their contrasting methods, both programs were driven by fear and a desire for control. In apartheid-era South Africa, the Aversion Project was born out of a worldview obsessed with racial purity and social conformity. Homosexuality, perceived as a threat to the established order, had to be purged with ruthless efficiency. Canada's Gaydar program, though not explicitly linked to a racist ideology, was similarly motivated by fear and a desire to maintain control. In the context of the Cold War, homosexuality was seen as a national security threat. The Aversion Project and Canada's Gaydar program left indelible scars on countless individuals and cast a long shadow over their respective societies. In South Africa, the program's legacy continues to haunt survivors, many of whom still struggle with the trauma inflicted upon them. The program's brutal methods serve as a stark reminder of the horrors that can unfold when hatred and intolerance are allowed to flourish unchecked. In Canada, the Gaydar program's legacy is one of shame and secrecy. Though the program officially ended decades ago, its chilling effect on open dialogue about sexuality lingered for years. To truly grasp the horrors of the Aversion Project and Canada's Gaydar program, one must delve into the historical context that allowed such atrocities to take root. Both programs emerged during a period marked by widespread homophobia, deeply ingrained social conservatism, and a pervasive fear of those deemed different. Homosexuality was widely viewed as a mental illness, a moral failing, and a threat to the social fabric. This climate of intolerance created fertile ground for discriminatory laws and policies to take hold. In many Western nations, including Canada, homosexuality was criminalized, driving LGBTQ plus individuals underground. In South Africa, the rise of the Aversion Project was linked to the horrors of apartheid, a system of racial segregation and oppression. Apartheid created a climate of fear and conformity, where any form of dissent was met with brutal repression. Homosexuality, seen as a threat to the idealized Afrikaner masculinity, was deemed a particularly dangerous form of deviance. The South African Defence Force, tasked with upholding the apartheid state, became a willing instrument in the persecution of homosexuals. The Aversion Project, born out of this toxic mix of homophobia, racism, and militarism, was seen as a necessary evil. In Canada, the rise of the Gaydar program was deeply intertwined with the anxieties and paranoia of the Cold War. The Cold War created a climate of suspicion and fear, where loyalty was questioned and dissent was often equated with treachery. Homosexuality, already stigmatized and criminalized, became tragically entangled in this web of Cold War paranoia. Canadian authorities viewed homosexuality as a security risk, influenced by the prevailing homophobia of the time. The Gaydar program was Canada's misguided attempt to root out this perceived threat, even at the cost of individual rights and human dignity. The Aversion Project and Canada's Gaydar program, though officially consigned to history, have left an enduring legacy of pain and trauma. These programs inflicted deep wounds, both physical and psychological, on countless individuals. The program's enduring legacy serves as a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of discrimination. For survivors of the Aversion Project, the scars run deep, haunted by memories of electric shocks and chemical castration. The psychological toll is immeasurable, marked by PTSD, depression, anxiety, and a profound sense of betrayal. Paradoxically, the horrors of the Aversion Project and the Gaydar program also served as a catalyst for change, galvanizing LGBTQ plus activism. The exposure of these programs sparked outrage and condemnation, forcing a long overdue reckoning with systemic homophobia. In South Africa, the dismantling of apartheid created a space for LGBTQ plus voices to be heard and for demands for justice to be made. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission provided a platform for survivors to share their stories and seek redress for the horrors they endured. The unfinished fight for equality. In Canada, the revelations about the Gaydar program, though initially met with resistance and denial from the government, eventually led to formal apologies, compensation for victims, and a commitment to address the systemic discrimination that had allowed such a program to exist. The program's exposure forced Canadians to confront a dark chapter in their history and to acknowledge the long-lasting harm inflicted on LGBTQ plus individuals in the name of national security. However, the fight for LGBTQ plus equality is far from over. While significant progress has been made in both South Africa and Canada with the legalization of same-sex marriage and the enactment of anti-discrimination laws, challenges remain. Homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of prejudice persist, often manifesting as subtle forms of discrimination, bullying, and violence. The legacy of the Aversion Project and the Gaydar program serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of human rights and the constant need for vigilance and advocacy. Lessons from the Abyss. The Aversion Project and Canada's Gaydar program stand as grim monuments to human cruelty when ignorance, fear, and power converge. These programs remind us of the fragility of human rights and offer a profound opportunity for reflection and learning. By confronting these dark chapters, we recognize the urgent need to combat all forms of discrimination. The enduring power of visibility. Canada's Gaydar program, while lacking the overt brutality of its South African counterpart, was no less insidious. Fueled by Cold War paranoia, the program transformed homosexuality into a national security threat. The program's reliance on pseudoscience and invasive surveillance had devastating consequences. The stories of those who endured these programs have been instrumental in ensuring these atrocities are not forgotten. Their courage in speaking out has helped to chip away at the stigma surrounding homosexuality. Visibility is a powerful weapon against ignorance and intolerance. Towards a future free from fear. The legacy of the Aversion Project and the Gaydar program is marked by both pain and progress. These dark chapters remind us of the importance of safeguarding human rights and celebrating diversity. The fight for LGBTQ+ equality is far from over. We must create a world where everyone can live with dignity, respect, and freedom from fear.